Alright, so what I thought we'd do today is go back and take a look at Resident Evil Village and kind of go over the things that the game did well, and to that extent maybe see return in the future, and then later in the video go over stuff that to me at least wasn't done as well and could be improved in like any new entries they decide to make. So yeah, we'll start with the good stuff and then work our way towards the stuff that I think needs improvement. So yeah, let's get to it. Straight away I do want to say that I think Village is a very good game, mostly well made. Have my own issues with it, like I said, but overall I quite enjoyed the game and the DLC that eventually came with it. Alright, so let's start with the biggest thing with the Village that I think everybody knows by now. So if you have played the game, you'll know that it's very inspired by Resident Evil 4. The flow of the game, certain events that happen in the game, certain mechanics that are present in the game, all big things from RE4. So some examples like the merchant system is in the game. You know, there's a shady merchant that sells you upgrades, more infantry slots and stuff like that, which again is present in Resident Evil 4. The actual flow of the game itself is very similar. So you start in a village, and then you move into a castle, and then the ending of the game is obviously set in some industrial kind of environment. So in Village's case it's the factory, and obviously in 4's case it's the island, but still very similar in terms of visuals. So yeah, there's a lot of inspiration from RE4. It's not a one-for-one. A lot of people have said it is a one-for-one. It isn't a one-for-one at all. There's very big differences between the two, but yeah, it's very inspired by it, which I wouldn't really consider a complaint. I think most people are big fans of Resident Evil 4, whether it's the original or the remake, and you know, if that is something that people enjoy, then there's no reason behind that not being the case with Village. And yeah, for the most part it seems that the actual gameplay side of the game was enjoyed by a lot of people, and obviously it did keep some horror elements from Resident Evil 7. Obviously they kind of toned down the horror from 7 with the Village, but there are still moments in the game that are quite scary on your first run through. So kind of wrapping up this kind of little portion of the video with the whole gameplay aspects of the game. The action focused games are good. I don't think they're nearly as bad as what some people would say they are. I do prefer the games like 1, 2, 3 and like Code Veronica and 7, how those games play. I do prefer it, but how 4, 5 and Village play are well done. 6 is completely different, but those games, the action focused games we have, are good. So I do feel like if they're going to make another action focused RE game, if they're going to use the groundwork of Village and probably now the 4 remake, I think it would still be a fun game, but just make sure to not copy the game as closely as they did with Village to 4. I think that's probably one of my smaller complaints with Village. I don't have many, but it's one of my smaller ones, where the game is so close to 4 that it almost feels like it's kind of a bit of a cop-out, but at the same time it does have its own moments and its own unique kind of situations that make it feel like it's not, you know, like a carbon copy. Okay, so moving on from the gameplay to the story side of things. I think the story for 7 and 8 specifically, just those two games together, is fine. I think there's issues with it connecting to the overarching story. I think there's still a lot of kind of plot points that have been left, or just very briefly mentioned and not really gone into as much. I don't know why they've kind of mentioned these things. For example, 7 had your Blue Umbrella and your connections, like the black market, shady bioweapon dealers, and it kind of boggles my mind that, especially on the Umbrella side of things, like why hasn't that been, you know, kind of pushed out more? Because it's such a big thing in the whole story. Why has it been mentioned once and then left for a whole game? I don't get that, but the story of 7 and 8, if you keep them, you know, just condensed to the actual game, is quite good. There are some issues which I'll get into now, but for the most part it's good, and it's a good send-off for the character as well. So moving into the issues with the story I have with 8 mainly. First of all, 2 major points of the story, and this is kind of a spoiler if you haven't played the game by now, but Chris being portrayed as this villain throughout the whole game, and him killing Mia. 1, obviously wasn't Mia from the very start of the game. Pretty obvious. 2, there's no way they would have made Chris bad, so the whole going with the idea that he is bad until near the end of the game is just ridiculous. People were under the impression that because he looked different from the 7 version that it wasn't actually him, but it is him, and yeah, just this whole idea of him being a villain is just nonsense. Now the ending of Village, the very end, with the whole mention of the BSA being this corrupt company now that are using bioweapons and stuff, very interesting. Please don't leave that in the dirt like they did with the Blue Umbrella. They need to bring that, it just needs to be the front and center of the next game. Whether that is just that storyline or it combines the BSA and the Blue Umbrella stuff together, whatever they do, the BSAA stuff needs to stay, because that is also just a huge thing to the main overarching story of the whole franchise, so it needs to be the priority. And then moving into the DLC storyline, obviously with Rose, and she's having, you know, powers and stuff like that. I don't think they'll ditch the character completely. I'd hope the character returns in some way in the future, but I don't really know when. But the idea of having like this alloyed character with, you know, traces of bioweapon abilities and stuff like that, it's pretty cool and hasn't been done regularly, so having a new character that can do that is interesting. However, if they're going to push for this BSAA storyline in 9 or whatever it's going to be called, they need to keep probably the most popular cast present in that game. Obviously Chris will probably play a big part in that as well. Jill, pretty much anyone you can think of that's related to the BSAA probably needs to be present in some way. So maybe we'll see some characters we haven't seen in a while, and that would definitely be a positive for the next game. And then finally, onto some smaller things with the game that I still think need mentioning. Replayability is a big thing in RE games, and I think Village nailed that. There's a lot of reasons to go through the game multiple times, whether that's upgrading weapons to max, getting the bonus weapons, or, you know, running through to do the certain achievements, whether that's your speed runs or, you know, healing or whatever. That's all present in this game, and yeah, that's a big thing for me. So if there's a lot of things to do that require me to replay the game, it's a good thing. So I'd imagine they'll keep that going with any future games. I think the remakes and 7 and 8 have done a lot in that kind of vein, where there's a lot of achievements tied to it and unlocks tied to it. So if they keep doing that, I'm sure that'll be a good thing for everybody. Staying on the topic of replayability for a little bit, just to kind of add in another complaint I think definitely needs addressing in a future game. Not for everybody, but I think the difficulty in this game was far too low on anything lower than hardcore. I think hardcore was fine. I did new game hardcore on my first run of the game. Thought it was challenging at points, but nothing crazy. I played about through it on standard a few times on New Game Plus and once on New Game, and I thought it was a complete joke. I never even touched assisted on this game, because I usually don't anyway, and I just thought standard was way too easy, so there's no point going lower than that. The Shadows was fine. I think it's such a big step down from Madhouse. I think Madhouse was probably one of the most fun, harder difficulties I've ever done, and going from that to Village of Shadows was just a bit of a letdown. But yeah, difficulty needs to be addressed in the next game. I know that's not for everybody. I know that not everybody wants to play the game on super mega hard difficulties and do hard stuff, but that's how I like to play, so hopefully they make the harder difficulties hard again. And then perspective, this is a small thing that everybody was kind of talking about. The option to play in a first or third person perspective was very welcomed when I did the DLC, so I think, you know, maybe keeping that option in, or just making the new game, sorry, a third person game overall. But that's pretty much going to do it. That's kind of my thoughts with Village and what I think could be improved and what I think is well done. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And yeah, thank you for watching. Remember to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you are new for more Resident Evil content every day. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.